My name's James Vance, I'm Group Head of Environment for Travis Perkins, and I'm going to focus today on net zero carbon, talking about our plans to decarbonise the business and the industry, hopefully you'll find that enjoyable. So here are a couple of the bits that I'm going to run through today, so I'm going to set the scene a bit. So we're going to be focusing on our ESG strategy, talk about net zero carbon and what our plans are for the business, and essentially look at why are we taking action. So I'll talk a bit about climate change and the need to decarbonise. Checking out our net zero carbon plans in detail, so looking at our buildings and our fleet, focusing even more then on the BSS operations and what actions we're taking specifically within BSS, and then focusing on the main part of our decarbonisation plan, which is all to do with our Scope 3 carbon emissions. So working with our suppliers to decarbonise manufacturing processes and come up with sustainable products. So just to start with, just a bit about me. My main responsibilities within the group are to lead that carbon reduction agenda. So there's a whole piece which I'll go into a bit more detail about. I also lead on our waste management and circular economy plans, which is again huge for the business. Overseeing the environmental management program, so we're certified to ISO 14001. So really important that we maintain our operation within legislation. Very important for our customers, but equally as a responsible business, we're able to demonstrate that through ISO 14001. Managing environmental reporting requirements. So at the moment we're going through an audit process, ready for our annual report. So they look at things like carbon waste, timber incidents. And finally there I've just listed about environmental training. So making sure that we've got a good awareness and training campaign within the business through the online platforms such as Thrive, so we can get the right messages out to colleagues across the business. So in total, been here 12 years in the group, 20 years in total in sustainability. So lots of experience to bring, and obviously have learned a lot within TP Group in terms of carbon and waste management. So in terms of ESG, so for Travis Perkins we have our own ESG strategy, but what that means is environmental, social and governance. Those are the three main elements that make up ESG. And I've just listed down, I don't know if you can see those, so things like carbon, renewables, waste, raw materials extraction on the environment side. On social, it's all about safety and well-being, human rights, anti-slavery, diversity, and within governance, we're looking at fair tax, anti-bribery, corruption. So lots of things that the whole kind of ESG program covers. Now, when I first started out, the way that people portrayed sustainability, which I think is still a nice way to look at it, is a three-legged bar stool. So if you have a three-legged bar stool where the legs are all equal, it's going to work. It's going to do as it's meant to do. So if each leg is represented by environment, economy and society, you're going to get sustainable development. If either one of those is either shorter or longer, that bar stool is going to fall over. It's not going to be sustainable. And that really helped me when I was setting out in this ESG world about the balance that we need between those three areas. So within TP we have a ESG strategy called Building for Better, and it's demonstrated here on this house. So you can see our group purpose. So we're here to help build better communities and enrich lives. But the main priority for our ESG strategy is all about decarbonising the industry. And we want to be really clear about that. So we want to be leaders within our sector. Now we have 4 strategic focus areas within that boundary, and they are modernising construction, sourcing responsibly, operating sustainably, and developing the next generation. And you can see a bit more detail on those slides there. And all of this is underpinned by those elements you can see underneath here. So safety and well-being, diversity and equality and inclusion, colleague voice, reward, charity and volunteering, and modern slavery and human rights. So this is a whole agenda that we're working through. And in my own role, I'm focusing on the environmental elements. And the other thing to take note of here is a supply chain wide approach. So we're not just focusing on us as a business, we're looking to be an influencer within our sector. So moving across into a bit more the environmental elements of that. So in terms of our net zero carbon plan, I thought it'd just be good to set the scene in terms of what net zero carbon is all about. So hopefully that graphic is working there. Yeah, brilliant. So when we're talking about net zero carbon, it's all about the balance between the amount of greenhouse gas produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere. And carbon in the atmosphere is really bad, and this greenhouse effect is something that I know we've been taught about for years, but essentially the carbon and the greenhouse gases are trapping the radiation that should otherwise be escaping from the surface of the planet through the atmosphere and back into space. It's actually trapping that the heat and is actually causing the global temperature to increase. So you can see the impacts that's going to have. Now, the evidence of this has been seen in science for years and years, but you can clearly see this is the classic hockey stick graph that they've used to demonstrate the impact that carbon has had and is present in the atmosphere. So you can see here, we've got a up and down level of, I guess, CO2 in the atmosphere until we get to about the Industrial Revolution, and we're seeing this massive increase that is continuing, and this is what's causing a lot of the issues that we're facing now with climate change. So really, really clear from the science that something is going on. There's too much carbon in the atmosphere. And I've added in this slide because I think it really demonstrates really well the temperature increases that we're seeing throughout the year. So this was developed by Professor Ed Hawkins at the University of Reading, and each stripe essentially is representing the average temperature of a single year. So this one now includes 2022, and it's basically, there's the stat there, 19 of the 20 warmest years have all occurred since 2001, with the exception of 1998, which was what they call an El Nino year, so abnormally hot year. So what this is telling us is that the Earth is gradually heating up. So we need to do something about carbon in the atmosphere. Now, we're already seeing events globally that are taking place that are causing concern. The danger of this is that they're happening much more frequently and much more, the impact is much more. The ones I've focused on here is, so the Canada heat wave, which you may remember from 2021. And when we talk about heat wave records being broken, it's normally by points of degrees. The one that they experienced was 5 degrees hotter than they'd ever experienced. And what actually happened there, it caused some social unrest because people went out to get aircon systems. Canada's not a naturally hot place, so they went out to get, obviously cool their environments, cause power cuts, and then it can lead to social unrest. So it has knock-on effects, not just the environmental impacts. And the other ones I've listed there, so London floods. We had the drought in the UK only last year, mudslides in Italy, floods in Europe, and we had a number of forest fires happening across the world, so in Turkey, Spain, Australia. So something is going on. And more locally for us, we had our first red extreme heat warning issued by the Met Office last year. So I think we all remember the heat wave that we had in August when it reached almost 40 degrees. There's a stat there that the UK is clearly getting hotter. So this is all linking in. So the science is beginning to link in with the carbon in the atmosphere to the extreme weather events that are happening across the globe. We're experiencing them now in the UK, so getting a lot closer to home. And even us as a business, we're impacted by this as well. So I thought it was really good to link in some of these effects. And I've picked on Keyline in Berkeley. So this was one of our sites. It was very close to a river, and we had a really heavy period of rainfall back in October 2021. The river breached its banks, and you can see the impact it's having. So we've got damaged products, we've got the safety concerns for customers on site and the colleagues working on site. So we're starting to see climate change impacting our own operations. So we need to be really switched on with this. So what are we doing about it? So we know the science, we've seen the impact it's having across the world. What are we doing about reducing our own operational carbon? And when I talk about operational carbon, I'm talking about scopes 1 and 2, so the energy in our buildings and the fuel that we're using in our vehicles. So from a footprint point of view, our operational scope 1 and 2 footprint in 2021 was about 78,000 tonnes of carbon. But just to put that into perspective, as a group and looking at our group carbon footprint, that represents only 1% of our carbon emissions, because scope 3 and the supply chain and the in-use emissions are taking up the rest of that 99%. So that's our prime focus is on scope 3. But when we look at our operational carbon, you can see that the focus is primarily on our transport, which represents 70%, and buildings 30%. And we've got some roadmaps that I'll go into a bit more detail about in terms of what we're doing to address those areas. In terms of the BSS operational carbon footprint, again, just looking into it a little bit deeper, you can see the bulk of it is that transport element. We've got sort of 16% on energy, 84% on transport, and overall about 4,000 tonnes of carbon. So of that 78,000 tonnes, that's where BSS is sitting at the moment. And the good thing is that we know about how we can decarbonise our buildings, and I'll talk through some of the measures we're taking. I think transport is the area that we're really trying to focus on, and it is difficult because the technologies are not quite there along with the infrastructure in the UK. So just moving on, and I've added this slide in just to help people try and visualise carbon a bit more, because we probably don't see this side of things enough. But yeah, if you could capture 1 tonne, what would it look like? So this kind of give you an idea in terms of the size of the prize and the impact it's having. But that is essentially 1 metric tonne of carbon dioxide. So just to help you visualise the image of carbon. So in terms of our corporate targets, in terms of the scope 1 and 2, again, just clarifying those different ones. So those are the direct emissions from our owned and leased assets, so the fuel in our vehicles and the energy that we're using in our buildings. We've set a target to be net zero carbon by 2035, and that includes an 80% reduction with a 20% offset. So what we're saying there is we're going to decarbonise as much as we can, and for the elements that we can't, we'll be doing investment schemes and tree planting, perhaps investing in renewable energy systems in other parts of the world, but tree planting would be a really nice tie-in for our business as well. If we can do more than 80%, obviously we'll attempt that. So the net zero carbon plan does involve buildings and vehicles. We already have electric vehicles within the fleet, so there's about 8 electric vehicles. We do have a fully electric HGV in our CCF business. So we are going to be looking to increase the amount of electric vehicles that are in our fleet. Equally, looking at solar panels and air source heat pumps in our branch network. And we've also been working with our construction team to map out, almost like the branch of the future, what would we expect new branches that we're going to be bringing online to have installed on it. So I think as a basic standard, you'd expect solar panels, you'd expect air source heat pumps, EV charging points supporting the electrification of the fleets, and lots of things that are linked into the roadmaps. So in terms of the buildings roadmap, you can see here we actually switched to a renewable energy tariff in October 2021, which was earlier than we actually planned. So commercially that was the right fit for us at the right time. But as I mentioned here, you can see we're looking at LED lights, we're looking at solar panel systems, and I won't go into the specifics here because I've got some slides that link in directly to what BSS have implemented on their sites here. But the other elements around intruder alarms, so interfacing lighting and heating systems so that when people leave the offices and leave the branches, there's going to be an automatic shutdown of those lights and heating controls. So nothing's coming on about 3 a.m. when no one's on site. And again, forklift trucks, switching over to electric forklift trucks are all the types of things that are listed onto our buildings roadmap, just making sure we have the capacity as well to electrify the fleet. In terms of the fleet roadmap, we have got a bit more detail around HVO. So that is one kind of stepping stone in terms of our net zero carbon plan about how we can achieve emission reductions in a time when the vehicle technology is still not necessarily fully reliable or available, and the infrastructure in the UK is still developing. So we're talking about using alternative fuels. It may not be HVO in future, but it's an option at the moment. Electrification of the forklift trucks, and also we've got things like the fleet management system. So we're seeing benefits through the assessment of the drivers. So they're essentially assessed on an A to E scale, I think it is, and there's a financial incentive if you drive more sustainably and you've got better fuel efficiency, so you're not idling, no harsh braking, not aggressive acceleration. You can actually achieve an A rating and get a financial incentive for that. And I think we've seen an improvement of around 6% on the miles per gallon through that system. So that's really, really good. So through this roadmap, we're kind of planning out a route to 2035. Now, in terms of the actions within BSS, these is the BSS forklift trucks. So I just made a note here that all the branch forklift trucks in BSS are already electric, which is fantastic news. Additionally, the ones at BSS Crosspoint are all electric, so you're ahead of the group in terms of that, which is fantastic. What we have got at the BSS Magna Park distribution centre are the introduction of the electric and lithium batteries. So these are even more efficient in terms of they charge quicker, we need fewer assets of them, and we've got the added bonus that we'll save 28 tonnes of CO2 by using them as well. So fantastic news that we're already progressing along that roadmap within BSS. The LED light installation. So this is another really big one for the group. So when we planned this out, this was going to be a 5-year project of installations across the TP group. To date, there's been around 13,500 installed across the estate. That includes 17 BSS branches, and there's going to be, I think, another 2 or 3 this year. And then we can focus on the other half. But the really good thing about the LED lights is they really are a quick win in terms of your emissions against the commercial benefits as well. So we're seeing, on average, it's around 46% of branch electricity consumption being reduced, which is fantastic. So BSS has witnessed a £109,000 a year saving. So again, commercially, really, really positive. And the saving alone on those figures is 145 tonnes of carbon just from those BSS sites. So again, really, really quick win, no-brainer to do as part of a net zero carbon plan. So we're going to be rolling out more of these. There's additional benefits, obviously greater lux levels, which may benefit health and safety. We've got less maintenance and repair, and again, just that payback period, less than 2 years. And as the energy prices are increasing, that payback period is going to drop down even more. So it really is a really beneficial measure to install. And just a bit about HVO within the BSS operation. So HVO is hydro-treated vegetable oil. We've currently got it located in 4 branches there. So you've got Glasgow, Newcastle, Derby and Southampton. One of the great things about HVO is that it's a drop-in fuel. So that means it can be used within an existing diesel engine without any modifications to that engine. And it can save 90% of the carbon emissions that you would traditionally see through the use of diesel. The other point I want to stress on this is that we will only accept certified HVO. So the fuel that we're using at the moment is certified through the Renewable Fuels Assurance Scheme, the government-backed scheme, just to make sure that there's no virgin oils, there's no palm oil, and it's produced primarily from waste oils. But this is a stepping stone in our net zero carbon plan as we see more vehicle technologies be implemented across the UK, supported with that infrastructure changes. Within the group, as part of that trial, we've used around 700,000 litres of HVO. The equivalent of the diesel would have been near 2,000 tonnes of carbon. But through that 700,000 litres of HVO, that's about 25 tonnes of carbon. So again, really beneficial to emission reduction, stepping stone in our plan. So we're going to monitor how that progresses throughout this year. I also wanted to just focus on waste and recycling. So this is really, really good in terms of carbon reduction, not directly, but you can see the benefits here. So I've listed some of the statistics of the waste and recycling that's being managed through BSS. They've got a fantastic recycling team at BSS Magna Park, who you can see here processing the cardboard that's being sent back through the branches. So these are no small figures either. So we've got about 300 tonnes of wood, 168 tonnes of cardboard. They do plastic film as well, and monitoring the metal that comes back as well. And I just wanted to highlight the statistic there. So the link to the whole carbon agenda is that 75% less energy is used by recycling the cardboard as it is to producing new materials. So big thumbs up for that. And also plastic as well. So we know the issue with plastic packaging. So we are collaborating with our supply chain partners to try and redesign how packaging is currently used. Can we make reusable packaging? Can we make it more sustainable? Do we need packaging at all on some products? What are the options? So coming up with innovative solutions there, but again, between 30 and 80% of carbon can be saved by recycling the plastic as opposed to producing new. So the final element really of the presentation is the biggest part of carbon management within the group, and that's all to do with Scope 3. And for BSS, I've linked it into commercial heating, and that should become apparent as we go through some of these slides here. So again, just a reminder of our corporate targets. Scope 3 for us, so that's all the indirect emissions in our supply chain, but that covers the manufacturing processes from the suppliers, but equally all the emissions that the customers are using through the use of those products. So for instance, the gas boilers, they are assigned to us and our Scope 3. So our target, as it says there, is to reduce our Scope 3 carbon footprint by 63% by 2035. And it's worth noting that we have had our targets approved by the Science Based Targets Initiative, which basically means that an external body has verified them in line with the science of climate change and says that we're in line with a 1.5 degree pathway. So we're trying to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees. So that was a really, really big tick for us and a really good validation that we're heading in the right direction. We've set the right targets. So like the other ones, we have set a dedicated roadmap here. So it talks around setting up working groups, around discussions around retrofit and projects like Whole House, and potentially lobbying government about what other solutions are out there for traditional commercial gas boilers. So a lot of work is being tailored through the supply chain to reduce the Scope 3. We've been doing some engagement sessions with suppliers throughout last year through online workshops, which I'll touch upon. But what we really wanted to do is map out really clearly what our main targets are, but then how are we realistically going to go there? And these will be updated. These are going to be evolving documents as things progress. So just a brief overview of Scope 3, because it's really so important. It covers a number of different categories. So I've listed them down there, but there's 15 different categories in total, and you can see the different types of elements they're looking in. We started our Scope 3 assessment with a third-party consultancy called South Pole. So they took all our sales data, they applied the emission factors, and that was done in early 2021. And that was the first time that we really looked into our Scope 3, and we're kind of managing that internally at the moment. But these next slides will dive a little deeper into some of those details. So in total, the Scope 3 carbon footprint for the group is around 14.2 million tonnes. So when you compare that to the 77,000 tonnes of Scope 1 and 2, you can see why we're focusing on this area and the need to focus on this area. So of the Scope 3, 63% is through the use of sold products. So looking at category 11, that is where we need to focus on. So what other systems can we use that could be emitting less, creating less emissions? Purchased goods and services around 30%, so that's our bricks and blocks and cements. And then we've got various other elements that we're going to be working on. But interestingly for BSS, and I've highlighted it here, because of the sales of commercial gas boilers, of the 14.29 tonnes, around 6.3 million tonnes sits within BSS. So there's a huge emphasis and there's a huge opportunity for BSS to start leading the market in terms of providing low carbon heating solutions and potentially moving away from traditional fossil fuel gas boilers. So yeah, when you compare it to the rest of the groups, yeah, the share is around 44%. So lots and lots of opportunity to go out, and you can see on this next slide some of the interventions that we're going to be working with to try and accelerate our Scope 3 reduction plan. So phasing out fossil fuel-based boilers, decarbonisation of purchased goods, improving energy efficiency of sold goods, so looking at lighting and electrical products, switching refrigerant production, so there's a thing called the F-gas regulations, which is looking to phase out harmful refrigerant gases, so we're obviously looking to see how we can do that. And also green transportation, so linking back into our own roadmap, can we share any best practice with our suppliers around how they can distribute products to us more efficiently? So the one word, I guess, that we've been mentioning on our stand today is all around collaboration, working together as one supply chain, sharing best practice, and just really making an inroad into these carbon reductions that we so desperately need. And really, on this last slide, it's a summary of what we need to do, what we have been doing. So continuing our engagement with our supply chain partners, all about increasing awareness, supporting with their own carbon calculations, so making sure they understand how they can calculate their own carbon footprint, and that's why we've been hosting a lot of online workshops last year. Looking at that manufacturing process, decarbonising how they're currently manufacturing the goods, requesting better product data is one thing that we're hearing from our customers. What's the embodied carbon of these products? So again, encouraging and working with our suppliers to obtain that information. Seeking innovative low carbon products that might be coming to market. So can suppliers tell us about anything that they're working on that we can inform the customers that might help develop and deliver their own carbon reduction plans? And I guess another big one there is upskilling the industry. As we see these innovative products coming on board, do we have the right skills in the construction industry to actually fit and install them? So lots of things to work on, Scope 3 being the main focus, and hopefully we've got time for Q&A. But thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been, in a nutshell, been insightful onto our net zero carbon plans.
I'll try not to make it too difficult.
Yes, thank you.
It was interesting because we were hearing earlier about the challenge of the networks, and I know one of the things that we talked about, or you talked about, was putting more electric vehicles in and forklifts, etc. And I know we had a bit of a challenge when we were looking at Magna Park, for instance, in terms of the networks. So what's the challenge from a BSS and group perspective in terms of how we engage with the networks, etc., to ensure that we've got enough power to move to electric?
Yep, that's a really good point. So it really is a partnership between the fleet team and the property team to assess whether we can install those EV charging points and the forklift truck electrification into those branches that we know may struggle with capacity. And I think working with the power distribution companies and kind of calculating what the cost would be to, do we need a new substation, which might be costly. But you're right, working very closely with the power distribution units, because we had an example at head office where the local council wanted rapid EV charging points, but the capacity simply isn't in there. So we said, we can put rapid charging points in, but we'll get blackouts in the offices. So I think it's making sure we're talking to all the stakeholders. But there's no easy answer. I think it's just working together with property fleet and assessing what can be done and the commercial impact of, I guess, upgrading that network. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope that was useful. And if you do have any questions, feel free to contact me on my email and calls and things. But thank you very much for listening.